Hi there. Welcome to another After Hours edition of WhaTheFlok. Oh, you're good at that, Justine.
I've listened to your podcast a few times.
Okay, so I have to announce there's no wine this time for our After Hours edition because, first of all, wine makes me sleepy. Second of all, it's pretty serious what we're talking about today. So we opted out of the wine so Chele doesn't get too crazy. And more importantly, I get to introduce Justine, our special guest for today, who I usually call Teeny because she is very teeny tiny. And now, how tall are you?
5 feet.
She's 5 feet tall. So I do feel a little like an Amazon sitting next to her, but
You're not an Amazon.
That's okay. I have a pretty aggressive personality anyway, so I'm good with that. I'm good with being an Amazon. So we do have a lot to talk about today, a lot of serious stuff. As usual, we'll probably pepper in a little organic humor because, laughter tends to be the best medicine for me at least, to find some sort of silver linings in everything that we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, I will jump in and read our quote of the day. Okay. Don't break a bird's wings and then tell it to fly. Don't break a heart and then tell it to love. Don't break a soul and then tell it to be happy. Don't see the worst in a person and expect them to see the best in you. Don't judge people and expect them to stand by your side. Don't play with fire and expect to stay perfectly safe. That's a quote by Najwa Zebian. And the title of our episode today is called Playing with Fire. And we will get into exactly why we titled it that. So first, Justine, I thought we would just do kind of a recap. What we're talking about today are the ICOC and the ICC lawsuits, and basically how we've got to where we are today. So we'll get the listeners kind of up to speed on the lawsuits. And I thought first we would talk about, which is all tied in on how you and I met.
Perfect.
Okay. So I've known Justine since the end of November.
Yeah.
So not that long.
Yeah, not that long.
Maybe 5 months.
Yeah.
And Justine, which I'll have you probably start then. Justine has been a warrior of truth and justice for at least the past 10 years. Basically kind of rattling cages, kicking on some doors,
Yeah.
contacting people, right? Making noise.
Making noise,
about what she herself had personally known of just the different abusive tactics within the ICOC and being raised in the ICOC. So maybe you can get us up to speed on how that started, just different things that transpired.
Well, about 10 years ago, I had 3-4-year-old and I was becoming a stepmother, and I had started blogging, and I was blogging about just life, but being a mom really started to highlight my childhood. And so I started writing about some of the trauma that I went through and being raised in a cult. And at the time, this is a teeny tiny corner of the internet. But I'm writing about this cult, and people were reading it, and people were sharing it and asking questions. Tell us more about a cult. Everybody,
Let me interject. When she says cult, she's referring to the ICOC,
the ICOC,
which some people have a really hard time with. That's fair. That's fine. In Justine's life, it functioned as a cult, so she refers to it as a cult.
Yes,
okay.
And I'm not saying that to hurt anybody. I have people who I love who are still in the ICOC,
right.
And I don't say this to hurt them in any way. A lot of the things that I'm saying could probably sound that way, and that's not where I'm coming from at all. My experience was being in a destructive mind control cult.
Right.
So people started asking more questions, and I started telling more of my story. The first one that kind of went baby viral was, so I grew up in a cult, and and I just told my story, and then people started reaching out to me and asking for me to tell theirs, and that's when it was like I have chills thinking about it. All of a sudden, everything opened up, and it wasn't just me, and it wasn't just my friends that I knew of. it was from all over the place. People from other continents were reaching out to me. So I started sharing more of their stories, but it really ignited me.
Right.
And then I ended up connected with some of the survivor groups, which were much smaller then.
Right.
And I really, really wanted to make a difference. It was really important to me to make a difference. But I was told that I was too angry.
You were too angry?
Yeah, they didn't want me to be like
a spokesperson.
Yeah, no, not at all. So I was rebellious, which was a theme of my life. That was a big thing that they always called me
rebellious
in the church. Yeah,
which we now know has basically kept you alive.
Literally,
by being
yes,
rebellious.
It did. Yes,
right. Okay.
Yes. It's a superpower, and who knew? So I was rebellious, and I started my own Facebook page for people to come to. And then I became one of the first lines of defense for people when they had family members who were in the ICOC or ICC. They missed and loved and wanted to help save. I became somebody that they, like the first person that you would go to. And then I would introduce them and bring them into these other smaller, closer knit groups, which at the time was harder to get into because they were so private. You couldn't even like search them. So that's what happened. And I really upset a lot of people. But the more I upset them, the more I was like, so there's something wrong, right? Like
you had touched on something. It was a nerve.
It like proved it.
Right. People were reacting so strongly to what you were doing. And if you don't have anything to hide, you don't react strongly.
Exactly.
Right. Now, was it you or someone else that had got some cease and desist letters?
That was Carl. He got cease and desist letters, but this is during the same time period where we were bouncing off of each other a lot. I will say it was kind of a fun time for us. Like a cease and desist letter from Kip McKean.
Right.
For people who don't know, you've mentioned him many times, but Kip McKean was kind of the original leader of the ICOC, and then he later created ICC.
Right, which I call Cult 2.0.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Yeah, which is turning out to be even more maniacal than the first one. Scary, right?
And like not shocking, actually.
Well, they escalate. Cult leaders usually escalate. They don't get better. They get worse.
Well, and we've found that whenever there's been an abuser and we've found one victim, there has been 2, there's been 5, there's been 10. It's just been growing and growing. And that's how the cult leaders are. They get away with one thing, well, then they're going to push it and push it and push it.
Well, and predators and perpetrators, again, they don't get better on their own. They escalate, right? That's why even with serial killers and other types of criminals, they don't get better, right?
No, they don't.
The crimes get worse.
Yeah.
And like you said, they kind of test the waters to see what they can get away with, and then it escalates from there. So, okay, so that's a little bit of a summary of how Justine found herself in this world, right, of rattling cages and finding out what types of stories and what types of abuses were out there. Somewhat similar with me, which I've already talked about, was this very podcast that we're doing. People started reaching out to me with stories of sexual abuse, right? And so what happened was I started to get more and more stories, and I started to feel more and more disturbed, but more and more confused about what to do with these stories because of the statute of limitations. A lot of them were older and had crossed that 10-year benchmark of when they could file. So as we know, there are no coincidences in life. I don't think anything's a coincidence anymore. So I had a friend, Bobby Samini, that I'd known for about 10 years, who's an amazing lawyer, but also just a very compassionate human. So our children knew each other from school, right? And so we had kind of bonded through our children, and I really trusted him as a father, as a lawyer, and everybody loves Bobby Samini, right? He just has a great reputation.
He's amazing.
He's amazing.
He's amazing.
Yes, just really compassionate, heartsy guy, but still a kick-ass lawyer. So over the years, different things would happen, and I'd say, hey, Bobby, what about this as far as legal ramifications for the ICOC, right? Like, they took all my money. Can I sue them? You know, just different questions I would throw out. And Bob would be like, well, not this or not that. So randomly, I hadn't talked to Bobby in 2 2 years, at least maybe it was 3 years that we hadn't connected. So I was talking to him about a different legal scenario in a certain business. So I was running different things by him, and out of the blue, not knowing what was going on in my life, he didn't know about the podcast, he knew nothing. He said, "Hey, Chele, was there ever any sexual abuse in the ICOC?" And I said, "Funny you should ask me that question, as I was just contemplating and meditating and praying this morning on what to do with all of these stories that were coming my way." So he said, "Oh, funny that this is happening. I'm on my way to have dinner with Senator Joe Dunn, who has been behind the scenes spearheading overturning the statute of limitations in the state of California." So he said, "Let me run all this by Joe." By the next morning, I get a text from him. I won't tell you the exact text because it did involve profanity, but it was just like, basically, "Holy crap, we're in. This is horrendous." So from there, that was the end of November. So after that is when you and I got connected, right? Because
I think it was like the beginning of November, because I remember Thanksgiving being really rough for me to have a normal conversation with anybody because we were keeping such a big secret.
Oh, okay.
Because we weren't allowed to tell anybody what we were doing.
Right. Okay, you're right. So it was November. We'll just say it's been since November. And what happened is I had recently joined the ICOC survivor pages, which are on Facebook. And then my friend Janet, who you know, introduced us and said, "Maybe you should talk to Justine.
I will never
She's
forget the
been
moment.
running down this road already, right? Blazing a trail." And so then you and I started talking and comparing stories.
I will never forget the moment I got that message. Like that, I was sitting in bed and I went, "Oh my effing God. You won't believe it," to my husband.
Right.
And that, I mean, I think I was like jumped in. I don't think you could have stopped me at that point.
No, you were locked and loaded from like,
I was like,
hello.
I have all of this.
You were like, you had me at hello.
Yeah, really.
Right. And so then her and I started comparing notes and pulling in other people. And when I had done that first post on the survivor page, it was basically just a shot from the bow, right? Like, let's see what's out there. And I even told Bobby, I was like, "Bobby, I know I had abuse in the ICOC, which I'm not ready to talk about yet, but I don't know. I've got maybe 5 stories." And it was like
5.
But it was like, it just broke open, right? So it went from, I'm not sure what we're going to find when we, look under the covers here, to, I can't keep up with all the phone calls. So we've taken in, I'll have to recount, but it's over 1,200 phone calls of all sorts of abuse. Obviously, a lot of them are sexual abuse stories, and I'd say are the hardest to listen to. But there's psychological abuse, spiritual abuse, clearly, which is the foundation of it all. Physical abuse, lots of physical abuse. And the most heartbreaking stories of financial abuse, where for some people, it's almost as hard for them to talk about that because their lives have been so annihilated financially and they've never recovered. They've got divorced because of it. Kids that haven't gone to college, people that have been homeless, tons of suicides. As a matter of fact, there was one just this week of a current leader in the ICOC's child committed suicide last week. So I don't even have the updates on that, but I was getting tons of calls yesterday about that. I don't even know what happened. I just know it was directly related to ICOC issues that the child had. So, you can imagine how heavy hold on. I just don't have words for that part of it. The heaviness, the stuff I hear on a daily basis is it changes you. It changes how I view the world.
Yeah.
Obviously, it changes anything I view about the ICOC. right? I've gone from, I want to stay neutral. I don't really want to think about that, to how do I not think about that? How do I not see this through? How do I not, help these people? And I knew it was bad, Justine. I didn't know it was this bad.
I didn't know it was this bad, and I knew it was bad. I think I maybe even knew it was worse for longer.
Yeah.
And then, hearing this, I mean, my heart breaks every time. The shower cries get me. It's like after I get off the phone, sometimes I have to go and just be in the shower and sob.
Yeah.
Because there's not enough tissues in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I try to stay strong on most days because I don't have a choice, right? You either break into a million pieces or you just decide to be strong and keep going. And I'm pretty good at that normally, but I have my breaking moments where I'll just be in like fetal position, sobbing and trying to grasp at those silver linings, right? And try to cherry pick all of the good that's coming out of it. But
finding ways to help in any way, too, I think has been something like a light, which we'll talk about later because that's good. But there has been a light for me is knowing that we are helping. Right. And my husband's often reminding me when it's hard, he's like, but look what you're doing. Look at, you are helping these people. You're giving a voice to the voiceless, which is huge.
Right. I agree with you. And we'll get to that. I really want to dig into that because, by the way, this is part 1 of part 2. As you can see, we will never get through this in the next 30 minutes, everything that's happening. So we'll get back to that in part 2 of some of those silver linings, right? And the beautiful moments and the beautiful things that have happened even for a lot of the survivors, right? But what I do want to talk about really quick, for me personally, what's happened and something I had my own kind of reckoning with and my own aha moments and my own realizations is when this first all started, I knew that I had had sexual abuse in the ICOC, but I didn't think, and this is true, I didn't think it mattered at first for several reasons, which I'll share. But I still, what I learned through Bobby and Senator Joe Dunn actually really helped me with this. I was discounting the things I had been through. And what the ICOC was very good at doing was training us that everything is our fault.
Yeah.
And anything that happens to you is your fault, or you didn't take advice, or you didn't listen. And there was that latent leftover indoctrination in my brain to where I thought, well, I don't really matter. This isn't about me. It's about everybody else. And because the sexual abuse that happened to me in the ICOC didn't happen by an ICOC member, I thought, well, I don't count, or it's not relevant is the better way, right? But that whole scenario was fostered and created because of the ICOC, which I'll explain in a second. So for the listeners, I am Jane Doe 1. I wasn't going to originally be a part of the lawsuits for several reasons. First of all, I thought I don't want it to appear like I have an axe to grind or that I had an ulterior motive. I actually didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to be a part of the lawsuits. But something Joe Dunn really helped me with, as I told him my story and I was relaying the other stories I was getting, I was like, well, here's what happened to me. And I was raped and this happened. And he goes, whoa, stop. What? And he's like, Chele, do you see what you're doing? You're discounting what you've been through. You're still hearing them in your brain. You're still buying into that. It doesn't matter that it wasn't an ICOC member. It was someone that the ICOC was trying to convert. So they kind of sent me in there as bait. Like, oh, this guy really likes you. That's why he came to church. Sit down with him and show your favorite scriptures. Like flirting spiritually. It was called spiritually flirting for the sake of recruiting people. And then they all laughed about it. Yeah, it's like a spiritual flirt. So But since they told me to not be alone with him, right? I thought, well, it's my fault because we were supposed to go out to coffee. So he came to my apartment, and this is in Orange County when I was overseeing the campus ministry. It was right by OCC Junior College in the apartment I was in. So, and it was right before I was getting married. So he said, oh, can I come in really quick to use the restroom? Sure, come in and use my restroom. Then he said, well, why don't we just have tea here? Because, you know, the coffee shop will be crowded, blah, blah. And I'm in a hurry. Didn't you say you wanted to show me some scriptures? Can you make me some tea? Make him some tea, and I'm not going to get into everything that happened because I'll sob. But if you read the lawsuits, it's in there. I'm Jane Doe 1. The whole situation he manipulated to attack me. I think it's my fault because my discipler told me to not be alone with him. And I was so sick of getting rebuked all the time and getting in trouble that I just went into this almost catatonic, well, that happened. How am I going to manage it? And shut down mode. I just shut down. I don't think I talked for like 2 days. So what happened was one of my roommates finally figured it out because I had bruises on my neck. And so she went and got me some tattoo cover-up makeup, covered it up. I wore like a turtleneck on a very hot day. So I do have people that I had to go back and find as witnesses because, you know, luckily I found her. And then I went on and told the guy that was the evangelist of the group that we were moved to, I eventually told him. And in a weird twist of fate, he disappeared 2 days later. And again, it's in the lawsuits. It's a very weird thing where he was escaping the ICOC.
Yep.
But in my twisted mind, I thought, see, I shouldn't have told anybody. It's bad.
Yeah.
What happened to me was bad. What I did was bad. And I told this guy that was bad. And now maybe I freaked him out. And that's why he disappeared, which I later found out was not true. He had planned on escaping for months. Anyway, so because of that, let's think about how sick that is for a second, though. All these years later, I was still hearing them in my head. It's your fault.
Shell,
right?
You saying this is giving me chills. How many times have you talked to a victim who has said things like, well, I put my rape or my molestation on my sin list? How many of us felt like we had done something wrong somehow?
Right.
When you weren't,
we all did.
You weren't the rapist.
Right.
You know, but
right.
Still somehow it was like this thing that we are carrying shame for.
Right. Yeah, and how telling is it that we're still hearing that? Because a lot of the survivors that have come forward, they have bought into the fact that it was their fault or their shame or they shouldn't talk about it or whatever they were told at the time, right? So that has been, I mean, a huge awakening process for me, so much so that I've had to do a lot of internal, digging into that. And what we'll get into next is the ICOC's response to these victims and some examples of what's happened because it's being reported back to me that some of them are even making comments about me in that, right? That either I'm lying or whatever it is. It doesn't matter because I don't care. I don't care at all, right? It's going to be a little more embarrassing for them in the end when it's everyone's truths do come out, right? And
and it's not just you though. I mean, they're saying that the victims are in this for money. And
right.
How many victims have told you that they feel guilty even?
All of them.
Like, literally. And it's like, I don't want anybody to have to be in our shoes doing this.
Right.
But I almost wish they could at least hear this, hear the fact that, like, this isn't about money. It's just that's the only way that there could be justice. Because it's not like we can give them time back. It's not like we can give them years back. It's not like we can take away what happened to them.
Right. Well, yeah, and that's a pathetic thing for them to say. And every single survivor has gone as far as saying, I don't want money.
Yep.
I won't accept it. I'll give it to charity. It's not about money for anybody. But like you just stated, clearly one of the main motivators for the ICOC is money.
It is.
Because they sure took a lot of it.
Yes.
Isn't that ironic?
Yeah.
Give us all your money. How much do you make? Give more. Special contribution, tithe. Why aren't you tithing? Here's our budget. But as soon as someone says they were abused, they just want money.
Yep.
You guys are the ones that want money.
Yeah, you guys want the money.
Clearly. Very clearly. I mean, it's just, and again, it's that type of manipulation and excuses it's pathetic.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed for them on so many
Shows
levels.
their true colors,
right?
though.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you know, quickly, the statute of limitations. Let's circle back to that in California because I started talking about Joe Dunn and how this all happened, and then I dovetailed into my story, which I knew would take me down a rabbit hole. I apologize. But the statute of limitations has been lifted in California, so that's why we were able to go back in and start filing cases. And that deadline has been extended, which is great. So for the time being, we're just going to keep filing cases, and that's where we're at.
And it's so important for you to know that if you experienced abuse in the ICOC or the ICC, it is not too late to come forward.
Right. Well, and what's happening is, and what the stories have revealed as far as the pattern within the ICOC. Yes, there are thousands of amazing people currently in the ICOC, people that I love and adore. There have been amazing people in the ICOC, whether they're current members or they've left, that I think joined that group for all the right reasons, because they wanted to help people and because they love God.
Absolutely.
But if you can hear what's happening now and you read the lawsuits and you're in the ICOC and you don't at least question what's happening or how the ICOC is responding and handling that, I'd find that quite concerning about your own connection to who God is or what Jesus stood for. Mm-hmm. The leadership, the people involved, the people in these meetings, the people that the abuse has been reported to for over a span of 40 years, for them to not report it or seek help for the victims or raise their hand or question or dig around, that's concerning. And that's called failure to report. And so I kind of want to get into that now and explain what has happened and what the ICOC's kind of strategy or formula has been to squash all of the abuse that has been reported over the last 40 years. And well, as we know, the roots of the ICOC, which has become clear, the roots were failure to report. The roots were, whoopsie, Chuck Lucas, we're going to push you over here and not talk about that, right? Chuck Lucas went on to abuse many people that have called us. And many people are aware of it. It's not a big secret, really.
Like people in the church are aware and have been aware of this.
And are like, oh, yeah, we knew about that.
And we're like,
right.
How?
So if that's the roots, of course, several of the branches are going to grow in that same fashion, right? People that have been directly abused by some of the people Chuck even abused. So you can follow it, right?
Yep.
You can follow the breadcrumbs backwards. By the way, Kip knew all of this. Spoiler alert.
Yep.
I don't think that's surprising.
Yeah, no, it's not.
You know what's funny? I don't talk about Kip a lot, mostly because he's almost in my mind. I don't want to say irrelevant at this point, but he's trained so many people that have gone on to do the same thing. So I don't buy into the, oh, it was all Kip.
Oh, no, it wasn't.
The bad seed's gone, no, so Kip, now we're different. I don't buy that.
Kip trained all of these little minions, and they're actually, monsters. He trained these people to be monsters, and now they are terrorizing. It's horrific. They are all little Kips.
Right. And they'll say they're not, and that he's the bad seed, well, then why haven't you stopped doing what you're doing, right? There's still this massive cover-up going on, and I see it evidenced today with how the survivors are still being treated.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my gosh,
and
seriously.
that just fever pitch protection of the reputation, right?
And no care for the survivors. Literally lying and saying, "Oh, we didn't know anything of this alleged abuse." Like, oh,
alleged. We are shocked and appalled.
I know. My blood is boiling when I think about it. Like my hands start sweating when I'm just like, when I know you know and you lie to my face.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh.
Right. Well, and that's the pattern of what has happened is once abuse is reported, and we'll just talk about the United States. We know that the church is international, but we'll just talk about the United States. The pattern was so similar of squashing the abuse. So the victim, I like to use the word survivor because I don't want to ever feel like a victim of this group ever again. But they are convinced to forgive the abuser, to accept their responsibility in it. The most horrific things have been said to our survivors.
Oh, that they nailed Jesus to the cross with their anger at their abuser.
Correct. Oh. Your bitterness. But even worse than that, we told you not to wear that.
Yeah.
We warned you about your short skirts. Yeah. Or our survivor in Boston, well, she just developed real early. And she was a real struggle and a liability to the brothers. We're not surprised. So the types of things that have been said to our survivors make my blood boil. Like you just stated. I don't have words. Yeah. I don't have words for that. So the secondary abuse, the re-traumatizing the survivors has been criminal. And that actually is a crime. It's called failure to report. And at the end, I'll read a list of everyone who's considered a mandatory reporter who is legally required to report abuse. Instead, they circle the wagons. They bring the elders in. They bring even people that are licensed marriage and family counselors in to counsel. And here's why you can't report. And here's why. And here's why we're concerned about you. And the way you're handling this, and your refusal to forgive.
You'll be responsible for bringing down the kingdom of God on earth.
Right. The fall of the kingdom will be on your head. You are going to hurt people's faith. That's a big one.
Oh, yeah.
This will hurt people's faith. It'll hurt the church. This is your brother in Christ. Right? You are going to ruin his life. I mean, you name it, it's been said. It is, that in itself to me is criminal. Right? So that failure to report of all the mandatory reporters that have chosen to take the side of the ICOC, to protect the ICOC, to protect their reputation, to protect their paychecks, to protect their position of power that they think they have, their egos. Again, that to me is the real crime.
Yeah.
That's been perpetrated against these survivors. The initial abuse obviously is horrific. But what happens with all of this secondary abuse? That is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to continue to be exposed.
And this is why so many people have not come forward, because they're going to be abused for being honest.
Correct. They see what's said and how they're treated. So something interesting to interject here. So I would say the ICOC's kind of first line of defense has been to put out statements that we are shocked and appalled. We didn't know. Even if these are true, they're very old, nothing recent. Well, spoiler alert, another spoiler alert. There's some real recent ones.
Really recent ones.
Yeah, they just haven't been filed yet. So,
oh yeah, that's actually kind of a really good point. Just because something hasn't been filed yet doesn't mean it's not going to. So like, you know, I would be afraid.
Right.
If I was somebody who's done these things, I would be really concerned at this point.
Rather concerned.
Yeah,
Incredibly
right?
concerned.
Incredibly concerned.
Right.
Just because we've been pretty quiet working on kind of the back end of it
Right.
does not mean things aren't happening. We were quiet for 2 months, and then the first
Right.
lawsuit came out, and
Right.
the second lawsuit came out.
Yeah.
Like, our silence is terrifying.
Yeah, I would say so. I would agree with you on that. So, well, let's throw in what the ICC's, the Cult 2.0 response has been, which is, again, I find it a little bit embarrassing and pathetic that this is the stance they're taking. But because Kip and some of his main leaders, I'm guessing, have what we've heard, that they haven't read the lawsuits, that they've been advised to not read them.
Yeah.
Of course, it's
spiritual pornography
in their world. And some of them are just incredibly unaware of what's going on because it's a very closed circuit system, right? So he stands from the pulpit and calls it persecution, which always makes me giggle.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, have I missed those scriptures where Jesus and his disciples were persecuted for sexually abusing a child?
Yeah, like,
Or sexual abuse in general?
Where was that? Where was that in the Bible?
Right, I've missed it. No, his disciples were persecuted and Jesus for their radical beliefs and their message. That's what they were dragged into court for. It wasn't because they were sexually abusing people and then covering it up and then lying.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's up with his people. How can they not connect those dots?
I feel like a huge thing is that they're not, so many of them are just not allowed to read it. They're not allowed to see it. And so it's harder for them to believe it.
Right. Well, and he keeps saying they're persecuting the church. They're persecuting God's modern day movement. No, we're not.
No, we're not.
We're persecuting humans that have abused other humans.
Yeah, we're persecuting rapists and
Right.
like pedophiles, literal pedophiles.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, and we got more stories even this week of people in the ICC, Kip's group, that have either been moved around,
Oh, yeah. Pass the trash.
passed the trash, sexual abusers, or abuse that was covered up. Very specific with lots of evidence. So it's okay. We'll when we're ready.
We're going to get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. You just enjoy the silence as long as you can. But
And we're not smiling because this is something that brings us joy. We're smiling because justice is finally going to be served.
right.
You know?
Right.
Like, winter is coming.
Winter is coming. Yeah. I'm smiling because people finally get to tell their stories, and they are not allowed to be called liars anymore.
Yes.
Right.
I'm not a liar, and I've been called a liar for my whole life, maybe, by the church.
I would say your whole life.
Yeah.
Because I know your story.
Yeah.
And that's the narrative that they needed to spin about you because you were too honest.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And I can tell you, in the ICOC and the ICC, honesty is their kryptonite. Whenever anyone was honest about anything, they were bitter, they were rebellious, they were faithless, they had secret sin.
Yeah.
No, it's actually called honesty.
It's called honesty.
And we realize that's a problem for y'all, right? Honesty is something that does not work in that group.
Nope.
Have to squash it.
Weirdly, though, right? Because in church, you would think that's where honesty should be happening. That's like why, so this is spiritual abuse. There is this twisting of scripture, twisting and manipulation of people. You're thinking that you're safe. You're told that this is the safest place ever, and the world is the problem. Right.
Right.
But actually, the most horrific things that have ever happened, a lot of them are literally right here, and then they're being protected.
Well, in my life, let's talk about me and you. In my life and in your life, which we'll get to next, growing up in, kids' kingdom in the church. I want you to share about that next. But the most unsafe place I have ever been is in the ICOC.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost died in the group. My life was destroyed. I mean, all the horrific things in my life happened in the ICOC. It was a very unsafe place for me, and it was a very unsafe place for all of our survivors.
For me,
Yeah.
for sure.
So, okay, so how I want to kind of wrap this up, and again, we'll come back for part 2. I'm going to share quickly about the official response.
Yes.
From the ICOC. And then I want you to share about your experience in Kids Kingdom. Okay. And then we'll close out on that. Okay. So in a nutshell, the ICOC, several of the groups have put out public written statements stating that they are shocked and appalled. Statements we have, because they were written and spread out. Interestingly enough, these groups said they didn't know, or it was a long time ago, that they are dedicated to getting to the truth, or whatever vernacular they were using. Groups like the LA ICOC, the South Bay group of the ICOC, Turning Point in the LA ICOC, Hampton Roads? I think it's Hampton Roads in Virginia. I think North River in Georgia. Quite a few put out. Oh, Boston. That's another one. And I just got back from Boston. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But don't worry.
You'll hear.
Boston's coming. So all of the ones that put out emails or statements and called the Rolling Stone article Satan's work, Satan's workers.
Persecution.
Boston's leader called it a poorly written Rolling Stone article. They don't mention the lawsuits. Convenient. They mention the article. Persecution. These things were a long time ago, and we are shocked and appalled. Okay. Those groups have been hotbeds of people reporting abuse. So you people in those groups know of more abuse, I'd say, than any other churches in the ICOC. Isn't that a coincidence that those who jump up and down the loudest have the most to protect?
Yes.
And I think, what is it, Hamlet? Thou doth protest too much, right? So why are you jumping up and down saying you didn't know when you've got multiple people reporting to you, which will all come out? Okay, so Justine, why don't you share about your experience growing up in Kids Kingdom, which is the name of the child's ministry in the ICOC?
Okay. There's so much to go into, but I think the most important thing is children in the ICOC are props. We are being used in every way possible in order to recruit, essentially. As a child, I was in grocery stores and being told to go walk up to that person and invite them to church, invite people to study the Bible. We're going to school, we're going to different, anything that you can involve your child in in order to be able to talk to their parents.
Right.
So that was...
so to draw the parents in.
Yeah, it's to draw the parents in, right. And think about it, it's innocuous, your children. Like,
sure.
It's totally innocent, and we're inviting you to church, which should be a safe place. The ICOC and the ICC are like evil geniuses in that way, like of being able to bring people in and them feeling safe. Now, this went horribly wrong for me. This was hard to talk about, and I do talk about it on the docuseries, so it's not the first time, but it's definitely really uncomfortable.
Right.
So there was a woman that my parents were trying to evangelize, to recruit, and my parents' discipler my stepmom's discipler told her that me and my sister had to go and sleep over at this woman's house because her daughter was about my age and my sister's age. And my sister and I are 15 months apart. So the idea was to bring this, if the girl liked us, she'd want to come to church with us. And then the mom ideally would become a disciple.
Well, and let's just to reiterate, a discipler, for the listeners that don't understand, was like a handler.
Yeah.
We all had a discipler. It was a pyramid tree. So from Kip all the way down, everyone had someone basically in charge of them or watching over them, right? And so that was a way that they really kept this a closed circuit system because everyone was, I don't want to say reporting, that might be a little bit too strong, but everyone was accountable to someone in the group. So your mom's discipler.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so go back.
So we go to her house, and there were a lot of things that ended up being strange that I didn't really understand then, other than some weird feelings. But the next morning when we woke up, we knew that we were going to be going swimming at her friend's house, this girl's friend's house. And the next morning we wake up and there's no parents there. And that was weird. This girl apparently was a latchkey kid. So she says, yeah, we're going to go swimming at my friend's house. But first we have to watch this movie. And she turns on pornography.
How old were you again?
7 or 8.
So you're 7 or 8 years old. Mm-hmm. Okay. And she turns on pornography.
This is the first time I've ever seen pornography, of course.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, now I understand that this girl was being groomed and was essentially grooming us. And I don't even know that she knew what she was doing.
No, she didn't.
After watching that, then it was time to go to her friend's house. And so we walk in Oxnard blocks, alone, like unchaperoned, to her friend's house. And when we get there, her friend is a man. An adult.
A grown man.
A grown man. Like, I mean, older. I couldn't tell you exactly.
And she was your age.
She was our age.
So she was around 8 years old.
She's eight-ish, yeah.
She has a grown-ass male adult friend.
And she goes swimming at his house. This is eerily similar to one of our
survivor stories.
Mm-hmm. When I read that story, I was rocked, and I asked you if pedophiles have a handbook or something. Yeah, I couldn't. I just was like, what? This other people have done this? So he had a rule in his pool, and you're not allowed to wear a bathing suit. And he molested us in his pool.
You and your sister.
Me and my sister. And check this out. This is like, I can't even. This is the part, like, it all makes me want to vomit. But we invited him to church.
Of course you did, because you were being good little disciples.
Mm-hmm. And he came
to church,
to a park service, Arroyo Verde Park in Ventura, and but my sister and I had told our dad what happened.
Right.
And I don't know what my dad did or said. I know that we never saw the man again, and the man left directly after whatever altercation had happened.
Right.
So my dad did go and handle it, and after that, the reins were really tightened on us. We no longer were spending the night just anywhere, although we still were spending the night at in Kingdom houses. Not that was always the most safe, but yeah. So
well, get into for a second, and then we're going to wrap it up here. But get into what we also had talked about when we started. We were filming a docuseries, by the way. That's all I can share about it right now, but it will be on one of the main streaming channels. I'll tell you that. Which I thought was interesting. What Sandy and you talked about was the fact that children are trained to have no boundaries.
Oh, fully.
With the hugging.
Oh, yeah.
And so get into that about what that does to a child where there's no boundaries and you are trained to trust the adults without question.
I did trust the adults without question, absolutely. And I naturally am an introvert, and a lot of people wouldn't know that because I'm a wonderful masker, because I was trained since I was 3 years old to turn it on, to get happy. Yes. Get happy. Oh my gosh. And then but then it was really horrible because when you were actually happy, they would come and break you down, and
you're right.
You couldn't really be.
You're not broken by your sin.
Yes.
But you taught me to be happy.
I know. There is no. Oh my gosh.
There's no win. It's a lose-lose.
It really is. And so then going into adulthood or even teenhood, it got really. I was so confused. I didn't know what was appropriate and what wasn't, and I mean, I didn't know how to say no, like sexually
You're not allowed
speaking.
to say no.
No, and so then even after I wasn't in the church anymore, I was afraid, which this isn't just a church thing. I think it's a societal thing. There is this sort of fear of men. I have a fear of men, but the fear of rejecting them and will they hurt me?
Right.
Now, in the church, though, I had already been taught that you're just supposed to trust them, and if they hurt you, you got to forgive them.
Or somehow you allowed it.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Or created it. Yeah.
Well, I caused brothers to struggle, even though I was also literally told this. I was blessed with a plain face and a flat chest.
You were blessed with a plain
Plain
face and a flat chest.
Yeah. And then I would be rebuked for my personality, and that was what was attractive because it wasn't my body.
So then you get rebuked for your personality.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So like, how could you like break me, and you wonder why I ended up with an eating disorder. You wonder why I ended up I attempted suicide.
Yeah.
Like, well, no wonder.
Which seems to be a common theme I keep hearing of people that have either committed suicide or thought about it or had ideations. Because it feels like the only way out. Because nothing we do is right or good enough.
One of our survivors right now that I'm working with, I don't know if she's going to make it. I literally do not know. And I get off the phone with her and think, actually, there's
several.
Another. Yeah,
we have another survivor in the hospital right now with trauma-related issues.
And this isn't shocking to me. I feel my heart just like,
I know.
This heaviness. It just sinks, and I'm not surprised by it. And that's horrible.
You mean you're not shocked and appalled?
Yeah,
like the official announcements?
No, I'm not. I'm not.
We had no idea. Yeah,
I was shocked and appalled 10 years ago.
Right.
When I found out there was more, yeah.
Right. Same here. For me, maybe 6 months ago was when all of these scales began to really fall from my eyes.
Right, yeah.
As all the stories came in. Well, I think that it's such a great element to understand of the sexual environment inside of the ICOC. It's either incredibly under-sexualized or over-sexualized, depending on who the audience was.
And it's
right.
Fully being in church, being in communion, and hearing grown men talk about their sin.
Sure. Their sexual sin.
Their sexual sin, and I'm a child sitting there. I'm with my other children friends, and we're listening to men and women. But it was extremely awkward hearing men talk about their sexual sin, confessing, and oh my gosh, it was just, now thinking back, I mean, that was grooming.
Right. Correct. You don't know where the boundaries are. You don't even know what is normal behavior at that point sexually.
I don't know what is normal behavior to even talk about. Like, I have no filter.
Right.
Because I was trained to stand on a pedestal and share my deepest, darkest secrets. I was forced to talk about masturbation since I was 4 years old.
Right.
Like, I mean, and then what? I go into the real world and people are like, Justine, you don't have a filter and this isn't appropriate. And I'm like, I don't know what appropriate is.
Right.
I'm constantly working on that.
Right. That's such a great point. So you think about children being raised in that type of backwards purity culture, where behind the scenes, all sorts of other things are happening, right? Mm-hmm. It's just sick. It's sick. So again, surprise, surprise, here we are.
Here we are.
You think, how can you be shocked and appalled when this is what has been built?
Not. They're lying.
Well, on the note of children, let's end out by reading a list.
Yes, please share us your list.
A list of who a mandatory reporter is, okay? And I got this from legal authorities in the state of California, but they said it's pretty much the same standard list across the U.S. So if you were wondering who a mandatory reporter is when someone reports abuse to you in the ICOC and the ICC, here, we will help you. A teacher, an instructional aide, a teacher's aide or teacher's assistant, certain school personnel, such as a classified employee or a public school administrator, or anyone at a private youth center, youth recreation program, or youth organization, a Head Start program teacher, a public assistance worker, an employee of a daycare or a community care facility, an administrator of a public or private day camp, a social worker, probation officer, or parole officer, an employee of a school district or a security department, a police officer at any local law enforcement agency, peace officers, employees of a protective service or law enforcement agency, commercial, film, and photographic print processors, a firefighter, healthcare workers such as doctors, physicians, surgeons, nurses, psychiatrists, psychologists, dentists, residents, interns, chiropractors, mental health professionals, EMT, and marriage and family therapist counselors. Turning Point Ministry, that's especially for you.
Mm-hmm.
Paramedics, foster parents, medical examiners, custodians of child care, elder care, or dependent care, long-term health and care facility employees, child visitation monitors, drum roll please, clergy members, including priests, ministers, rabbis, and religious practitioners. So basically, everybody that has been reported to.
Everybody who's been reported to.
You guys are all mandatory reporters. That's a crime. It's called failure to report. And you might want to look into what happened to the Southern Baptists. Tons of them were arrested for not reporting. Okay, now I'm just all riled up. Sorry. I'm glad we're going to part 2. I need a break.
Yeah.
I need to reel myself in. Maybe I should have had some wine. Kind of calms me down. Okay, let's end on the quote of the day, which I find even more appropriate with what we just shared. Don't break a bird's wings and then tell it to fly. Don't break a heart and then tell it to love. Don't break a soul and then tell it to be happy. Don't see the worst in a person and expect them to see the best in you. Don't judge people and expect them to stand by your side. Don't play with fire and expect to stay perfectly safe. Due to the behavior of the ICOC and the ICC, past and present, they can no longer expect to stay perfectly safe. Do I have an axe to grind? No, I don't. But do we have survivors to help? We sure as hell do. All right, come back for part 2. Remember to guard your hearts and your minds. No one should have control of those except for you.
No,